Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are back with another question. This one says, Vinny, I recently conducted a stop smoking session with a family member. Right after the session, they decided to smoke, and smoking felt different to them. Oh, that's cool. Didn't actually want to smoke anymore. However, the next day, he tried to smoke again. Yeah, and went back to his habit. I'm frustrated and doubting my ability to help him quit. What should I have done differently, and what should I do in my next session? Okay, so this is actually a pretty interesting question because I think it brings up a lot of traditional advice around navigating these types of scenarios. So I'm sure we've all heard like shouldn't work with family members, right? Or you should charge a ton of money because that's an indicator of motivation. And so I think let's look at a couple of these in turn here. So for one, I've helped people quit smoking for free, right? It just happens. So the motivation and the money are not always 100. That's not always 100% of an indicator. Right? I think it's generally the case that if people are willing to pay a lot of money to solve a problem, sure, they're motivated because they're in such pain. They're willing to part with that much cash, right? So there is a logic to that I think is solid and sound, but it's not an absolute by any means. I think probably a lot of times that adage is used to just help people feel more comfortable about charging for their services. I think a lot of times that's what's happening with that statement. And ultimately, I think you should just realize the truth and the value of what you're doing, right? And just have that integrity about like you're really helping people change lives. And so you should be compensated for that. I think it's great. And you don't have to tell yourself a story about it. Because the reality is the reality, and it's a heck of an honorable one in that way. So the other thing about working with family members, yeah, I worked with family members. I've had mixed results, but I wouldn't assume, right? I mean, they have unconscious minds too. They're super powerful. They don't just shut off because, right? Like a lot of times when I worked in a more traditional way, I would run into these problems because there was a need for leverage per se. There was a need for authority, compliance. And so I think a lot of the traditional explanations around why you wouldn't work with a family member make sense in that way. Because it's like, yeah, they might not see you as a hypnotist. They might not see you as an authority figure. But I don't work like that now at all. I don't even, none of that stuff even enters my mind, right? But I'm sure you've seen some of the demos and stuff with how I operate. It's quite different. We're not using any traditional hypnotic techniques. We're not using pre-talks, protocols. We're just meeting that client at their problem, and we're allowing their unconscious mind to show us what it needs. And we just do that, right? It's just a really simple way to work with folks. So yeah, I don't have those concerns, which just doesn't. And again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't, especially if you're working a traditional way. You probably do want to follow those guidelines. So now that we've kind of weeded through, I think a lot of the traditional feedback you get with this type of question, I would say the big thing that person, your family member, needs to understand is like you cannot quit smoking for them, right? Like sometimes folks are under the I think it's kind of our fault in the industry to a degree. We're using our best to use metaphors to try to explain how we work with folks and what to expect. So we'll talk about like reprogramming an unconscious mind or something like that. Um, and when we talk like that, I think folks are expecting, quite naturally they assume, okay, well, like if my mind's reprogrammed, then like my ability to do this thing probably shouldn't exist anymore, right? Because I've been reprogrammed. And again, we're doing the best we can with the metaphors, right? It's just tricky. Um, so it's almost as if they think we have a magic wand, we're going to wave it, and that's going to solve their problem. But we know anybody that's worked with humans consistently, that's not really how change occurs, right? There's all kinds of stuff that goes into it. And anybody that's done hypnosis for a while, they know there's just a varying degree of results with things. So, depending on how you're operating. So, all that being said, I think it's really important to embrace the truth and the reality of the situation that your family member has to make the decision to quit. Okay. And during a session, all kinds of learnings and understandings can emerge that can help them make that decision. But ultimately, they have to make it. You can't make it for them. Your protocol can't make it for them. Your technique, your script, whatever that person has to make. So this is just, I feel like I beat this dead horse a lot. I think it's really important because that, I guess if you're working more traditionally, that might create a sense of desperation because it's like, oh no, what am I doing? But how I experience that truth and how my students experience that truth is that it actually takes the pressure off you entirely. And it actually, in a way, it takes the pressure off that client, right? Because it's not, I went through this thing for an hour and a half, and I'm supposed to, uh, they're not like constantly assessing, hey, is this working? Am I doing it right? All those types of things clients can go through. And then once we spit out the other end, did I magically change? Do I just feel relaxed right now, like the afterglow of trance, or am did this work? Right? We don't really want them in that place. So it's okay. There's a lot here that I'm throwing at y'all at once. Um, but when we embrace the reality of what's really going on, none of those pressures exist for that person, right? They know it's going to come down to them making a choice. And so we're just helping them explore and understand their orientation to the problem differently and to themselves. So this is very empowering, right? That type of activity can sort of spread into other areas of their life too. So this is a fun thing. I think one other point I want to make here is in terms of doubting and getting frustrated about your ability, I would take a step back for sure. I would recommend taking a step back and considering, like, I don't know how many sessions you've done. Um, and the reality is, like, frustration and doubt is kind of a part of a learning process too, right? That's an opportunity for you to really, you can explore some of that. But the big thing is like being able to let go of that and continue to see clients consistently. You're just, before you know it, you'll look back and you'll just be it. This will just be what you do, right? It won't be like something you think about. You'll show up differently on social media because I guess in some sense we could say like your identity will change. So it's completely normal to feel those things, and in no way are those an indicator that you can't succeed at this. Like frustration and doubt is in no way an indicator that you can't become very successful at helping people quit smoking or whatever the thing is that you want to do, right? Um, it's just a stage. It's just a phase. It's completely normal, right? You're gonna experience it. You're gonna experience it anyway. Like pick whoever you like the most in the industry, like whoever you look up to, and if you have the opportunity to ask them a question, have you ever experienced frustration and doubt about this? If they're being honest, they're gonna say yeah, right? Like it's just a normal part of the learning process. So yeah, I just think that's really important to consider as you're taking all this in. So just I think to recap here, make sure it's clear that you don't have a magic wand. You can't quit smoking for them. Ultimately, it's their choice. You're helping them navigate how to get there. And look, I talked about working in a traditional way versus the way I work. The reality is people have insights during those traditional approaches too. It's not like, right, that it does show up for them because they're tapping into just different ways of thinking. So make sure that's clear to them. Make sure they know they need to make a choice. It's going to come down to some extent, it's probably going to take some commitment. I think that's an important thing to call out for them: choice and commitment, honoring their choice. And yeah, and then I guess the big thing on the frustration and doubt is just give yourself a break, right? You're learning this. Even if you're a few years into it, the reality is like there's just a time on task. There's a frequency question there, and it's going to take as long as it's going to take, right? But you just stay on the path, and one day you'll have that ability. You won't even think twice about it. It'll be great. I think that's all I have for this right now. If there's something that you want me to go into more detail about, I'm happy to. Feel free to shoot me a message, right? Or just reply somewhere. I'll go into more detail. I'll elaborate. I hope that helps. And hey, I want to say just thanks for getting out there and helping people quit smoking, right? I lost a lot of family members, and that's actually why I started pursuing working in this industry, was to help people quit. So I really appreciate you getting out there and doing the hard work. That's really cool. All right, thank you. Take care.